All right, hold my hands. Page, 2-page, and a little bit more of questions that we've turned in. We're doing a series, and we're starting a sermon series this morning called Glad You Ask. And I've kind of come to the church, I've come to you guys, and I've said, hey, I need some questions. And we need some good questions. And we need some questions, genuine questions, that you have about faith and God and knowing Him. And so I've got 2.5 pages of some good questions and a couple bad ones. Yeah, y'all need to start putting your names on some of these. So that's not true. They're actually almost all good. Almost. But here's the truth. I want more questions. And I even want some better questions. And so this morning, I put out, we're almost out of those cards, but we put out some of those cards still around the church. This morning, everybody is going to need to turn in a question. Let me just let you know where we're going. And so you can do this a few ways. You can get one of the cards and write it. There's sermon notes in the backs of the chairs too. You can get, it's like blank paper, so you can write one. Hey, Josie, let's put that slide up right now. Scan me. Not me, but that thing. You can get your phone out and turn your camera thing on and put it up there, and hopefully it'll give you a link that, does it do it? What? You got to zoom in. I got to get out. Yeah, the millennials got it. Boom. Hurry up, older people. What? Some of you guys are like, what are those devices everybody's holding? Get my head out. You got. All right, scan that thing. And it should take you to another thing, a website, and then you're going to be able to write your questions. Did it work? Can I get back up on the stage now? Yeah. I'm not asking that question, actually. Never mind. I was in college. I went to college and undergraduate in California, and I had a friend who, man, I feel like people are still taking pictures of me up here, but it's not. I had a friend who would go and work in Hollywood on movie sets, and he was a peon. He would kind of do whatever needed to be done on these movie sets. And one day he got this job of, he had to take care of a childhood actor, a child actor, like a famous child actor star. I don't even remember who it was, but and if I knew his name, you would know who he was. And so my friend went, and all day he had to help make sure this kid, who was a teenager by then, I don't know, had the right soda he wanted and was just taken care of and kind of be his personal assistant. And my friend came back and he said, hey, how'd the day go working with that famous kid? Oh, it was okay. And he said, I spent the whole day with that kid. And he said, now here, I need you to hear this. He said, you can really tell the maturity of someone by the questions they ask. He said, that kid didn't ask me one question, anything about me. In fact, I didn't hear him ask anyone any question about them. It was all about him. And that lesson, and when I was in college, has really stuck with me. And that line that my friend said, you can really tell the maturity of someone by the questions they ask. There have been times that my wife and I have spent, had a great meal with someone or gone out with someone and hung out with an individual or a couple, and we've left and hey, that was a great night. Yeah, we had a great time. And then we said, it was kind of interesting. They never asked one question about us. Okay. Do we ever get so shallow, so small, so self-obsessed that we don't ask good questions to other people. That we're so self-focused. We don't even ask good questions to get to know others. I heard another quote recently. This is one I recently heard, and it was about leadership. And it said, a good leader is not the one who knows all the answers, but someone who knows the right questions to be asking. Great leaders ask great questions. I'm called on to lead this church. And I say, Lord, what are the right questions? What are good questions to be asking? Because God, we want to bring glory to you by helping people build authentic relationships, God, with you and with each other. So are we doing that as a church? God, how about this? What does an authentic relationship with God look like? What does it entail? I mean, Mark, one of the elders, stood up somewhere and said, hey, yeah, this is the mission of our church. Okay, we can know the mission, but what is that? God, what does that entail? And our life groups, the things we do as a church, life groups, Sunday mornings, is the student ministry and the children's ministry, the mission trips and the things we're involved with around the world. God, are we building authentic relationships with you? Because we definitely do not want to be, we're not just about religious activity, right? Let's do a bunch of religious things. I love that song that we sang this morning. Simple gospel. God, we want to know you. Not just do a bunch of religious activity. Are we helping people who know God to know him better? What about this one? Are we helping people who don't know God to be moving closer to him? Tyler did an awesome job preaching last week. Tyler, you did a great job. Right? Come on. Tyler, we are really, we're just grateful to have you leading the student ministry and teaching us and leading us. And last week, Tyler did the sermon and was talking about Christianese, an inside language that Christians can use. And sometimes we don't even know what the heck it means, but definitely people who are not Christians don't know what it means, and kind of helping define some of these terms. What is a disciple? What does discipleship look like? Okay, the same is also true. Asking good questions is also true in your parenting. Okay? This is extra credit for this morning. Don't write this down as your question, but maybe write it down somewhere. This is especially for parents who've got kids at home right now. Great parents, I'm going to say, do three things. Number one, they make clear boundaries. Number two, they give consistent consequences. Number three, they ask great questions. Okay? When your 4-year-old or 8-year-old or 14-year-old throws spaghetti on the wall during dinner and stands up and walks out, is there clear boundaries? At our dinner table, we don't pick the food up and throw it against the wall. Is there clear consequences? When we do that, there are certain things that that will happen as a result of our behavior or our misbehavior. And let's be honest, a lot of times parents just get so ticked off, they think that's like good parenting, right? I yelled at you and I gave you consequences. Don't do it again. And then great parenting isn't, you're going to ask great questions. When your kid's sitting in their room and is done crying, you're going to go and sit in there. You say, hey, what happened? Why did you get so angry? What's going on behind it, underneath it? And parents, ask great questions of your kids and listen. Boundaries, well, let me say it this. Rules are built with boundaries. Relationships are built with questions. Let me say that again. Rules are built with boundaries. Relationships are built with questions. Relationships are built with questions. Parents, do you ask your kids good questions? Do you listen to them? Great managing is not giving good advice. barking orders at people. It's asking great questions. Do you manage anyone in your work? Managing is asking great questions. Hey, what's on your mind? How are you doing with goals? What do you think could happen? What needs to happen to help you be even more successful in your work? Great managers ask great questions. The questions you ask matter. Glad you asked. What questions are you asking? And I want to push in. I'm going to shepherd you. I'm going to pastor you a little bit this morning. Even the questions when we come to God and the questions that we ask and we want to launch and catapult towards Him, the questions that we ask, it really matters. Let me share with you. My wife and I are in a life group, and we've had this life group that's been going for a number of years that we're a part of. And so when you're part of a life group, as many of us here in the church know, it's just a small group of people that get together and really hash out life and ask great questions and listen to each other and open up the scriptures and grow in faith, grow an authentic relationship with God and each other. That's what a life group is. That's why we do these. So in our life group, we've been together long enough that we've gone through a number of different topics and a number of different things and studies. So we were coming to this fall, at the end of last summer, coming this fall, we said, hey, what should we do for our life group? What should we focus on this year? So the leaders, we talked about it, and then we said, well, let's go to the group and ask. And we went to the group and we said, hey, let's address some questions we have. And so we said, okay, that's what we're going to do. And so we started talking and say, okay, what are the questions that we have about faith? What are the questions that we have for God? And so we started to get some things together. We're like, yeah, we have questions about politics and where religion and politics and how it meshes in our crazy world and what all's going on. We got a good foundation in this life group, right? You got to have that to be able to talk these things. What about sexuality, homosexuality, LGBTQ things, and God and the Bible? Let's talk about that. Yeah, I've got questions. Hey, and also, why doesn't God make Himself more evident? Like, if He's really God, why doesn't He just make Himself evident? Why is He so hard to find something? Yeah, I got questions about that. We say, oh, and what about the Bible? Why is it so hard to understand? And why does sometimes it contradict itself? And why sometimes does it seem like God's one way in the Old Testament and a different way in the New Testament? Yeah, I got those questions. Let's deal with these questions. So we got all ready. All right, we're going to get into it. And then all of a sudden we had what I'm going to call a revelation. I'm going to call it a revelation. We realized that we were approaching God with our list, expecting Him to give us answers. Someone's calling. We realized that we were approaching God with our list, expecting Him to give us answers. That was our posture. And we said, what if we changed our posture? And instead of approaching God and asking questions that revolved around our desires and our needs, what if instead we ask questions where we recognize that God has come near to us and that we sought to better know God and His heart, how to have a more authentic relationship with Him? What if we shifted our approach from engaging with the Scriptures to just get a bunch of answers and maybe get a bunch more questions, instead to engaging with the Scriptures to know God more? Relationships are built with the right questions. So this morning, I'm going to ask us a few questions. Questions that come from a correct posture, which I believe will actually bring a lasting change in the outcome that we're longing for. I know we have really good questions. And some of us even here, when I just say, hey, what are your questions about God? You give me some of those questions I mentioned and a bunch more, and they're good questions. What I'm going to push into us as a church is saying, I don't want just good questions. I want really the right questions that are ultimately going to lead us into a deeper relationship with God and knowing Him more when we get those answers. So, we're going to go to the Bible. And we're going to look at some questions in the Bible, and it's going to help guide us and direct us. So I've got about 15 minutes, and I think it'll take about 30, so this should go really well. If you have a Bible, open it up. Genesis, we're going to start in the beginning. Genesis chapter 3, verse 1. Do you know who asked the very first question in the Bible? Satan, the enemy. The very first question in the Bible is, did God really say you should not eat from any tree in the garden? The first question in the Bible actually isn't a question meant to build relationship. It's a question meant to break relationship. Did God really say? And this question reverberates within humanity, and it reverberates within you. Did God really say you should forgive your enemies? Did God really say, bless those who persecute you? Did God really say that Jesus is the way and the truth and the life? Did God really say that if you want to lead, learn how to serve? If you want to be rich, learn how to give? Did God really say that? Do not miss the fact. Humanity was led away from God by a question. And it was a question which put the focus off of God and on themselves, on their appetites and their preferences. God is Father, and it said God laid out boundaries. And the question said, oh, did God really lay those boundaries? You'd be okay going outside. Look at how sweet it is. Look at your own appetites. Doesn't that fruit look good? What does God really know? No, life will be outside of that. That's all constraining. And their appetites and their hunger, and yeah, it does look good. It looks pleasing to the eye. It looks like maybe there'd be life. Maybe that fruit tastes really good. They chose to do what God said not to do. And what they found was not a deeper life, but a separated life. They became ashamed. Adam and Eve in the New Testament, they become ashamed. They see each other and they say, we're naked. We're ashamed of who we are. They hide. Humanity hides from God, from each other. So they're hidden. And so the second question in the Bible is God enters in this picture, and Adam and Eve have been led astray by Satan, the enemy who wants to steal, kill, and destroy. They've done what he said. They've gone outside what God created. There's consequences for that. And God enters in, and then he asks a question. Listen to his question. He says, where are you? Where are you? A revealing question. God longs for relationship. But disobedience, sin, has stained humanity. And there's a broken relationship and a brokenness within themselves. God says, where are you? We're hiding, God. We were afraid of you. Isn't that an awesome question, God? Where are you? I hear him asking that one today. You hear God, or you hear Satan whispering in, did God really say? Really what God's saying is, where are you? Come here. Adam and Eve have kids, Cain and Abel. Cain gets angry and he kills his brother Abel. First murder. Humanity, sin stained humanity, not just their separation within themselves and then each other, but then their anger, and they actually steal life, brother to a brother. And God comes in and he asks a question. Chapter 4 of Genesis. He says, where is your brother Abel? To Cain, he's, where is your brother? It's a simple question. Look at what Cain answers. Am I my brother's keeper? Cain answers with a question. You hear how wrong this question is? Am I my brother's keeper, God? Why are you asking me where he is? You go find him yourself. A deflecting question, a hiding question, a denial question, not a good question, not a question that is going to build relationship. It's a question that kind of really shows broken relationship. Am I my brother's keeper? Friends, these are a few of the many, many questions, and throughout the Old Testament especially, that show us questions that actually lead us away from a relationship with God. It's questions with the self, a sin-sane self, at the center. So let's look at some questions that are asked in the Bible that are examples of God-centered questions. Questions that are actually going to lead towards restored relationship, finding genuine answers, not questions that are going to be hiding or deflecting. I just pulled some questions out from the life of David. In the Old Testament, David was the second king of Israel. And they say a man after God's heart. He just is this guy who has this passionate love and walks with God really intimately. I want to share with you some of his questions that he asked in the scriptures to be like almost examples or to rouse you and to recognize. Here's one of them in Psalm 8, 3-4. David says, when I look at your heavens, I mean, that's kind of why, see these pictures on the side, why we've got them? I just think we should all go look at the stars more, honestly. I think it's a tragedy of living suburban life and just looking up to the heavens and the stars and how it stirs you. So David says, when I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established, what are human beings that you are mindful of them? Mortals that you care for them. Hear the difference of this question? God, you are creator and you have created the heavens and you are so much more grand than us. How is it that you even care for me? You hear that question? God, what is it that you are so majestic and you have created me and you care for me? I don't get it. It blows me away. I don't even think I can grasp it. Questions that lead us into relationship. There's another one. Because it's not just, because some of us struggle. Let's be honest. All of us struggle. We have some genuine questions and aches. Am I telling you don't ask? Genuine, like you hurt and say, God, I hurt. Why do I hurt like this? Why did this happen? Can we not ask those? No. Look at this one that David asks. Psalm 13:1. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? God, where are you? God, where are you? And it's a genuine question, but I don't think it's a finger-waving question. It's not. It comes from a deep place. God, I'm wrestling, and where are you? But I'm going to read this whole psalm. It's not too long. And I put it on the board. How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? David goes on. How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? Many people who studied David said, man, he struggled with depression. Look on me and answer, Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. And my enemy will say, I have overcome him. Maybe his enemy was depression. My enemy will say, I have overcome him. And my foes will rejoice when I fall. Hear that genuine, heartfelt question to God? Now read this one. Read these last two verses of it. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me. He says, God, I'm going to cry out and I'm going to ask really hard questions because I really struggle. And I'm also going to root myself in trusting you and trusting that you're going to bring answers. I'm not just going to inflate myself and think I can go up to the God who made the stars and wave my finger in his face and turn and walk away. God, I will recognize who you are, but I'm going to ask what I'm really struggling with. 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 19. David's got stuff going on in his life. He's dealing with things like we all deal with things. He says this, "Then David inquired of the Lord, saying, 'Shall I go up against the Philistines? Will you give them into my hand?'" David had this keen ability with all kinds of life circumstances to say, okay, I'm not just going to charge this one on my own. I'm not just going to go move forward just doing it how I want to do it. In every situation, I'm actually going to come before and say, God, what do you want me to do here? In a genuine way. And what's interesting, when you read it, sometimes God says, go attack the Philistines. Other times he says, no, don't go do it. David knows, and this is why he has such a heart after God. David knows, God, if you are with me, I will be okay. If I go outside of you, I'm not going to be okay. So God, I need to know that I'm walking in your will. In the detailed circumstances of his life, his questions, David's questions, always sought to know God's will. Because David knew that knowing the will of God is what leads to the answers of life. Jesus asked the best questions. There's a time his followers were in a place, his disciples, those who were gathering to hear from him and to hear his teaching, they were surrounded by a sea of diverse worldviews. I know we know nothing of what this is like. And Jesus looks at those who are following him and he says, who do people say that I am? Who do people say? Jesus came and said, who do people say I am? Who do people say Jesus is today? What are all the different answers to that question? Then, 2 verses later, he says, but what about you? He asked. Who do you say that I am? And Jesus takes it, let's be conceptual and let's be philosophical and let's look at all the different possibilities. Well, some people say this and some people say this, or others say that, or if you take that, then you're that, or what about you? Who do you say I am? Because you will need to come to a place where you give an account and you give an answer. So who do you say I am? Jesus, to a people who were self-centered, self-interested society. I know we don't know anything about this. People who are stuck in conniving relationships and consumeristic appetites. Jesus asks this question: what good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? And he causes us to wonder, to reflect, to take stock, to be convicted. Is a life of self at the center, a life that is driven by our selfish appetites, really filling the longing of our souls? Jesus one time came up and there was many who were sick and paralyzed, and there was one who was paralyzed who was sitting near a pool where he was supposed to be able to get healed, and they were all supposed to be able to get healed there. And Jesus walks up to this man who had gotten so enwrapped in his identity of being a paralyzed person, a sick person, because the brokenness and the sin stain and the woundedness of life, sometimes we can begin to get our identity actually from our woundedness and our brokenness. This happens today, it's happened always. And Jesus walks up to a man who seems to find his identity and he's paralyzed. And Jesus walks up and he looks him in the eye and he says, do you want to get well? And the answer for many of us may be that we don't really want to get well. We want to ask questions that enable us to keep hiding. No, God, I'll just come to you. Am I my brother's keeper? We'll use questions that deflect. We'll ask questions to hide behind. Let's just have great intellectual conversations about if God exists, so we never have to actually answer the question, what do we believe? And what do we have our faith? What do we worship? What do we live for? Okay, the last scripture, before we all start writing our questions. It's this one. It's in Revelation chapter 30. This is not a question. It's not a question. Revelation chapter 3, verse 20. It's Jesus speaking. And he says this, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and will dine with him, and he with me." This is one of my favorite scriptures, honestly. And I read on this scripture, I read a bit of a commentary on this verse by a man named Francis Peabody, and I'm going to read it to us. I want you to lean in and listen to this. This verse, Revelation 3:20, is part of in the book of Revelation, is this small letter to a church in Laodicea. There's 7 churches that are addressed, and this is the church of Laodicea where this scripture comes from. Francis writes, "Here was a church at Laodicea which had deliberately shut its doors on the higher life. It was a church that was neither cold nor hot. They were lukewarm, indifferent, a spiritless people. And to such a people, willfully barring out the revelations of God, comes Jesus in this wonderful figure, standing at the door like a weary traveler, asking to be let in. Such a picture just reverses the common view which one is apt to take of the religious life. We commonly think of truth as hiding itself within its closed door, and as of ourselves as trying to get into it. We speak of finding Christ, or proving God, or getting religion, as if all these things were mysteries to be explored, hidden behind doors which must be unlocked, as if, in the relation between man and God, man did all the searching, and God was hidden. But the fundamental fact of the Christian life is this, that the power and love of God are seeking man. That before we love him, he loves us. That before we know him, he knows us. That antecedent to our recognition of him must be our receptivity of him. That was a big line with big words, so let me say it. That antecedent, that is the thing that precedes. That which precedes our recognition of him must be our receptivity of him. God, we don't recognize you, and we're not going to recognize you until we are receptive of you. And we don't want just questions that we're going to lob at you to really hide from you. We want questions that are going to really help us to know you. Coleridge said that he believed in the Bible because it found him. It is for the same reason that man believes in God. God finds him. It is not the sheep which go looking for the shepherd. It is the shepherd who finds the sheep. And when they hear his voice, they follow him. This is not contrary to nature. The same principle is to be noticed in regard to all truth. Take, for instance, any scientific discovery of a physical force, like that which we call the force of electricity. There's nothing new about this wonderful power. It has always been about us, playing through the sky and inviting the mind of man. Then, someday, a few men open their minds to the significance of this force, and they appreciate how it may be applied to the common uses of life. That is what we call a discovery. It is the opening of the door of the mind. And one of the most impressive things about science today is to consider how many other secrets of the universe there are at this moment which are knocking at our doors, waiting to be let in, and to perceive how senseless and unreceptive we must seem to an omniscient God when so much truth standing near us is beaten back from our closed minds and wills. It's the same with religious truth. Here are our lives, shut in, limited, self-absorbed. And here are the messages of God, knocking at our door. And between the two, only one barrier, the barrier of our own wills. Religious education, I would say discipleship, is simply opening the door of the heart. Christian discipleship is simply that alertness and receptivity which hears the knocking and welcomes the Spirit, which says, if any man will but open the door, I will come in and dine with him, and he with me, and I will ask good questions, because I know you. And you will ask good questions, because I've gone to great lengths, says God, for you to know me. And so, friends, listen, these questions are really good. Okay, but I wanted to take a morning to spur you on before we start diving into them the next 4 weeks, to spur you on even more, to say, what are the questions that you have, maybe deeper than even just your intellectual stumbling blocks, but your emotional, your soul? God, what are the questions that we could ask that we're actually going to build more authentic relationship with you? What are those questions? Because those are the questions I want to deal with. Those are the questions I want to lead us into and then pastor us through over these next 4 weeks. That at the end, we don't come up with, oh great, we have some more answers that just are going to cause us to ask more questions, to sit in a dialogue of discussion and really go nowhere. Man, we have questions that lead us into knowing who God is, that deepen faith and increase the longing of our soul, and then we find a rootedness that then starts to begin to answer and give us the power to answer a lot of the other questions. So what are your questions? I'm going to invite the band to come up, and I'm going to give us just a couple minutes. I'm going to let you guys sit there, think. God, what are some of the questions? Matt, how do I hear God's voice through reading the Bible? Because, man, my selfishness and my sinfulness is overwhelming. How do I allow God's Spirit to direct me? Not just my selfish nature. How do I move from a life that seems to be characterized by doubt to a life that would be characterized by faith? What questions? God, great relationships are built on great questions. Pray that you would convict us, Lord, of the places where our questions are deflecting and are hiding, are shallow. I pray you would direct us into questions which actually are going to build authentic relationship with you. Help us to ask the right questions, Lord.